Section 20 of the Metamorphoses. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Thomas Copeland. Book 15, Part 1. Meanwhile, it is a question who can sustain the burden of so great a task, who can succeed so great a king. Then Fame, as a faithful herald, selects illustrious Numa for the throne. He, not content with knowing the usages of the Sabine race, conceives larger plans in his generous soul, and seeks to know what is nature's general law. His great fondness for this pursuit caused him to leave his native Cures and take his way to the city, note Crotona, return to text, which once gave hospitality to Hercules. There, when he asked who was the founder of this Grecian city on Italian soil, one of the old inhabitants of the place, well versed in its ancient lore, thus answered him: "'Tis said that the son of Jove, returning from the ocean, enriched with the herds of Spain, came by good fortune to the borders of Licinium, and there, while his cattle grazed upon the tender grass, he entered the home and beneath the friendly roof of the great Croton, and refreshed himself by quiet rest from his long toil. And as he took his leave, he said, Here ages hence shall stand the city of your descendants. And the words proved true. For there was a certain Miscellus, son of Alamon of Argos, the man of all that generation most beloved of heaven. Standing over him as he lay buried in deep slumber, the club-bearer, note Hercules, return to text, thus addressed him: Up and away from your native land. Go seek out the rocky channel of the distant Isar. And he threatened him with many fearful things should he not obey. Then did his slumber and the presence of the god withdraw together. The son of Alamon arose and silently recalled the vision which was still vivid in his memory. Long was he in great stress of doubt. The god bade him depart. His country's laws prohibited his departure. The punishment of death was appointed to the man who should desire to change his fatherland. The bright sun had hidden his shining face beneath the sea, and thick night had raised her starry face from the waters, when the same god seemed to stand before him to give him the same commands, and to threaten worse and heavier penalties if he should not obey. He was sore afraid, and as soon as he made ready to move his household belongings to a new abode, the rumor got abroad in the town, and he was tried as a breaker of the laws. When the case for the prosecution had been closed, and the charge was clearly proved without need of witnesses, the wretched culprit, raising his face and hands to heaven, cried out, O thou, to whom thy 12 great labors gave thee a claim to heaven, help me, I pray, for thou art responsible for my sin. It was the custom in ancient times to use white and black pebbles, the black for condemning prisoners, and the white for freeing them from the charge. At this time also the fatal vote was taken in this way, and every pebble that was dropped into the pitiless urn was black. But when the urn was turned, and the pebbles poured out for counting, the color of them all was changed from black to white. And so, by the will of Hercules, the vote was made favorable, and Alamon's son was freed. He first gave thanks to his patron Amphitrion's son, and soon with favoring winds was sailing over the Ionian Sea. He passed by Salentine Eritum, and Sybaris, and Spartan Tarentum, the bay of Siris, Cremissa, and the Iapygian coast. And scarcely had he passed the lands which border on that coast, when he found the destined mouth of Isar's stream, and near by this a mound of earth which guarded the consecrated bones of Croton. There, in that land, as the god had bidden him, he laid his city's walls, and named it from him who had been buried there. Such was the ancient tale, confirmed by established fame, both of the place and the founding of the city on Italian soil. There was a man here, a Samian by birth, but he had fled forth from Samos and its rulers, and through hatred of tyranny was living in voluntary exile. He, though the gods were far away in the heavenly regions, still approached them with his thought, and what nature denied to his mortal vision, he feasted on with his mind's eye. And when he had surveyed all things by reason and wakeful diligence, he would give out to the public ear the things worthy of their learning, and would teach the crowds, which listened in wondering silence to his words, the beginnings of the great universe, the causes of things, and what their nature is, what God is, whence come the snows, what is the origin of lightning, whether it is Jupiter or the winds that thunder from the riven clouds, what causes the earth to quake, by what law the stars perform their courses, and whatever else is hidden from men's knowledge. He was the first to decry the placing of animal food upon our tables. His lips, learned indeed, but not believed in this, he was the first to open in such words as these: O mortals, do not pollute your bodies with a food so impious. You have the fruits of the earth, you have apples bending down the branches with their weight, and grapes swelling to ripeness on the vines. You have also delicious herbs and vegetables which can be mellowed and softened by the help of fire. Nor are you without milk or honey, fragrant with the bloom of thyme. The earth, prodigal of her wealth, supplies you her kindly sustenance, and offers you food without bloodshed and slaughter. With flesh the wild beasts appease their hunger, and yet not all, since the horse, the sheep, and cattle live on grass. But those whose nature is savage and untamed, Armenian tigers, raging lions, bears, and wolves, all these delight in bloody food. Oh, how criminal it is for flesh to be stored away in flesh, for one greedy body to grow fat with food gained from another, for one live creature to go on living through the destruction of another living thing. And so, in the midst of the wealth of food which earth, the best of mothers, has produced, it is your pleasure to chew the piteous flesh of slaughtered animals with your savage teeth, and thus to repeat the Cyclops' horrid manners, and you cannot, without destroying other life, appease the cravings of your greedy and insatiable maw. But that pristine age which we have named the Golden Age was blessed with the fruit of the trees and the herbs which the ground sends forth, nor did men defile their lips with blood. Then birds plied their wings in safety through the heaven, and the hare loitered all unafraid in the tilled fields, nor did his own guilelessness hang the fish upon the hook. All things were free from treacherous snares, fearing no guile, and full of peace. But after someone, an ill exemplar whoever he was, envied the food of lions, and thrust down flesh as food into his greedy stomach, he opened the way for crime. It may be that, in the first place, with the killing of wild beasts, the steel was warmed and stained with blood. This would have been justified, and we admit that creatures which menace our own lives may be killed without impiety. But while they might be killed, they should never have been eaten. Further impiety grew out of that, and it is thought that the sow was first condemned to death as a sacrificial victim, because with her curved snout she had rooted up the planted seeds and cut off the season's promised crop. The goat is said to have been slain at the avenging altars because he had browsed the grapevines. These two suffered because of their own offences. But ye sheep, what did you ever do to merit death? A peaceful flock born for man's service, who bring us sweet milk to drink in your full udders, who give us your wool for soft clothing, and who help more by your life than by your death. What have the oxen done, those faithful guileless beasts, harmless and simple, born to a life of toil? Truly inconsiderate he, and not worthy of the gift of grain, who could take off the curved plough's heavy weight, and in the next moment slay his husbandman, who with his axe could smite that neck which was worn with toil for him, by whose help he had so often renewed the stubborn soil and planted so many crops. Nor is it enough that we commit such infamy. They made the gods themselves partners of their crime, and they affected to believe that the heavenly ones took pleasure in the blood of the toiling bullock. A victim without blemish and of perfect form, for beauty proves his bane, marked off with fillets and with gilded horns, is set before the altar, hears the priest's prayer, not knowing what it means, watches the barley meal sprinkled between his horns, barley which he himself laboured to produce, and then, smitten to his death, he stains with his blood the knife which he has perchance already seen reflected in the clear pool. Straightway they tear his entrails from his living breast, view them with care, and seek to find revealed in them the purposes of heaven. Thence, so great is man's lust for forbidden food, do you dare thus to feed, O race of mortals? I pray you, do not do it, but turn your minds to these my words of warning, and when you take the flesh of slaughtered cattle in your mouths, know and realize that you are devouring your own fellow laborers. Now, since a God inspires my lips, I will dutifully follow the inspiring God. I'll open Delphi and the heavens themselves, and unlock the oracles of the sublime mind. Great matters, never traced out by the minds of former men, things that have long been hidden, I will sing. It is a delight to take one's way along the starry firmament, and leaving the earth and its dull regions behind, to ride on the clouds, to take stand on stout Atlas' shoulders, and see far below men wandering aimlessly, devoid of reason, anxious and in fear of the hereafter, thus to exhort them and enroll the book of fate. O race of men, stunned with the chilling fear of death, why do you dread the sticks, the shades and empty names, the stuff that poets manufacture, and their fabled sufferings of a world that never was? As for your bodies, whether the burning pyre or long lapse of time with its wasting power shall have consumed them, be sure they cannot suffer any ills. Our souls are deathless, and ever when they have left their former seat do they live in new abodes, and dwell in the bodies that have received them. I myself, for I well remember it, at the time of the Trojan war was Euphorbus, son of Panthous, in whose breast once hung the heavy spear of the younger Atrides. Recently, in Juno's temple in Argos, Abbas city, I recognized the shield which I once wore on my left arm. All things are changing, nothing dies. The spirit wanders, comes now here, now there, and occupies whatever frame it pleases. From beasts it passes into human bodies, and from our bodies into beasts, but never perishes. And as the pliant wax is stamped with new designs, does not remain as it was before, nor keep the same form long, but is still the selfsame wax, so do I teach that the soul is ever the same, though it passes into ever-changing bodies. Therefore, lest your piety be overcome by appetite, I warn you as a seer, do not drive out by impious slaughter what may be kindred souls, and let not life be fed on life. And since I am embarked on the boundless sea, and have spread my full sails to the winds, there is nothing in all the world that keeps its form. All things are in a state of flux, and everything is brought into being with a changing nature. Time itself flows on in constant motion, just like a river, for neither the river nor the swift hour can stop its course. But as wave is pushed on by wave, and as each wave as it comes is both pressed on, and itself presses the wave in front, so time both flees and follows, and is ever new. For that which once existed is no more, and that which was not has come to be, and so the whole round of motion is gone through again. You see how the spent nights speed on to dawn, and how the sun's bright rays succeed the darkness of the night. Nor have the heavens the same appearance when all things wearied with toil lie at rest at midnight, and when bright Lucifer comes out on his snowy steed. There is still another aspect when Palantius, note Aurora, return to text, herald of the morning, stains the sky bright for Phoebus coming. The god's round shield itself is red in the morning when it rises from beneath the earth, and is red when it is hidden beneath the earth again, but in its zenith it is white, because there the air is of purer substance, and it is far removed from the debasing presence of the earth. Nor has Diana, goddess of the night, the same phase always. She is always less today than she will be tomorrow if she is waxing, but greater if she is waning. Then again, do you not see the year assuming 4 aspects in imitation of our own lifetime? For in early spring it is tender and full of fresh life, just like a little child. At that time the herbage is bright, swelling with life, but as yet without strength and solidity, and fills the farmers with joyful expectation. Then all things are in bloom, and the fertile fields run riot with their bright-colored blossoms. But as yet there is no strength in the green foliage. After spring is past, the year, grown more sturdy, passes into summer and becomes like a strong young man. For there is no hardier time than this, none more abounding in rich warm life. Then autumn comes, with its first flush of youth gone, but ripe and mellow, midway in mood between youth and age, with sprinkled grey showing on the temples. And then comes aged winter, with faltering step and shivering, its locks all gone or hoary. Our own bodies also go through a ceaseless round of change, nor what we have been or are today shall we be tomorrow. There was a time when we lay in our first mother's womb, mere seeds and hopes of men. Then nature wrought with her cunning hands, willed not that our bodies should lie cramped in our strained mother's body, and from our home sent us forth into the free air. Thus brought forth into the light, the infant lay without strength, but soon it lifted itself up on all fours, after the manner of the beasts. Then gradually, in a wobbling, weak-kneed fashion, it stood erect, supported by some convenient prop. Thereafter, strong and fleet, it passed over the span of youth, and when the years of middle life also have been spent, it glides along the downhill path of declining age. This undermines and pulls down the strength of former years, and Milon, grown old, weeps when he looks at those arms, which once had been like the arms of Hercules with their firm mass of muscles, and sees them now hanging weak and flabby. Helen also weeps when she sees her aged wrinkles in the looking-glass, and tearfully asks herself why she should twice have been a lover's prey. O time, thou great devourer, and thou envious age, together you destroy all things, and slowly gnawing with your teeth, you finally consume all things in lingering death. And even those things which we call elements do not persist. What changes they undergo, listen, and I will tell you. In the eternal universe there are 4 elemental substances. 2 of these, earth and water, are heavy, and of their own weight sink down to lower levels. And 2, air, and fire, purer still than air, are without weight, and if unopposed, fly to the upper realms. These elements, although far separate in position, nevertheless are all derived each from the other, and each into other falls back again. The element of earth, set free, is rarefied into liquid water, and thinned still further, the water changes into wind and air. Then, losing weight again, this air, already very thin, leaps up to fire, the highest place of all. Then they come back again in reversed order, for fire condensed passes into thick air, thence into water, and water, packed together, solidifies into earth. Nothing retains its own form, but nature, the great renewer, ever makes up forms from other forms. Be sure there is nothing perishes in the whole universe. It does but vary and renew its form. What we call birth is but a beginning to be other than what one was before, and death is but cessation of a former state. Though perchance things may shift from there to here, and here to there, still do all things in their sum total remain unchanged. Nothing, I feel sure, lasts long under the same appearance. Thus the ages have come from gold to iron. Thus often has the condition of places changed. I have myself seen what once was solid land changed into sea, and again I have seen land made from the sea. Seashells have been seen lying far from the ocean, and an ancient anchor has been found on a mountain top. What once was a level plain, downflowing waters have made into a valley, and hills by the force of floods have been washed into the sea. What was once marsh is now a parched stretch of dry sand, and what once was dry and thirsty now is a marshy pool. Here nature sends forth fresh fountains, there seals them up, and rivers, stirred by some inward quakings of the earth, leap forth, or, dried up, sink out of sight. So when Lycus is swallowed up by the yawning earth, he emerges far away and springs forth again with different appearance. So Erasinus is now engulfed, and now, gliding along in a hidden stream, reappears as a lordly river in the Argolic fields. And they say that the Mysis, ashamed of his source and former banks, now flows in another region as Caicus. The Amanenus now flows full over the Sicilian sands, and at times its sources quenched is dry. The Anigris was once wholesome to drink, but now it pours down waters which you would not wish to taste, since there, unless all credence is to be denied to bards, the twiformed centaurs bathed their wounds, which the arrows of club-bearing Hercules had dealt. Further, is not the Hypanis, sprung from the Scythian mountains, which once was fresh and sweet, now spoiled with brackish water? Antissa and Pharos and Phoenician Tyre were once surrounded by the waters of the sea, but now not one of them is an island. The old inhabitants of that region once possessed Leucas as part of the mainland, but now the waves wash clear around it. Zancli also is said to have been a part of Italy until the sea washed away their common boundary and thrust back the land by the intervening water. If you seek for Helice and Buris, once cities of Achaia, you will find them beneath the waves, and the sailors still show you the sloping cities with their buried walls. Near Troezen, ruled by Pythias, there is a hill, high and treeless, which once was a perfectly level plain, but now a hill. For, horrible to relate, the wild forces of the winds, shut up in dark regions underground, seeking an outlet for their flowing, and striving vainly to obtain freer space, since there was no chink in all their prison through which their breath could go, puffed out and stretched the ground, just as when one inflates a bladder with his breath, or the skin of a corned goat. That swelling in the ground remained, has still the appearance of a high hill, and has hardened as the years went by. Though many instances that I have heard of and known suggest themselves to me, I shall tell but a few more. Why, does not even water give and receive strange forms? Thy stream, horned Ammon, at midday is cold, but warm in the morning and at eventide. And they say that the Athameneans set wood on fire by pouring water on it when the moon has reached her last point of waning. The Cacones have a river whose waters, if drunk, turn the vitals into stone, make marble of everything they touch. Crathis and Sybaris, a stream not far from our own region, make hair like amber and gold, and, what is still more wonderful, there are streams whose waters have power to change not alone the body, but the mind as well. Who has not heard of the ill-famed waves of Salmacis and of the Ethiopian lakes? Whoever drinks of these waters either goes raving mad or falls into a strange deep lethargy. Whoever slakes his thirst from Clitor's spring shuns the wine-cup and abstemiously enjoys pure water only. Whether there is a power in the water which counteracts the heating wine, or whether, as the natives say, Amatheon's son, note Melampus, returned to text, after he had freed the frenzied daughters of Troitus of madness by his magic songs and herbs, threw into those waters his mind-purifying herbs, and the hate of wine remained in the spring. The Lyncestian river produces an effect the opposite of this, for if one drinks too copiously of its waters, he staggers in his walk, just as if he had drunk undiluted wine. There is a place in Arcadia which the ancients called Phenius, mistrusted for its uncertain waters. Shun them by night, for, drunk by night, they are injurious, but in the daytime they may be drunk without harm. so lakes and streams have now these, now those effects. There was a time when Ortygia floated on the waves, but now she stands firm. The Argo feared the Symplegades, which at that time clashed together with high-flung spray, but now they stand immovable and resist the winds. And Aetna, which now glows hot with her sulphurous furnaces, will not always be on fire, neither was it always full of fire as now. For if the earth is of the nature of an animal, living and having many breathing holes which exhale flames, she can change her breathing places, and as often as she shakes herself, can close up these and open other holes. Or if swift winds are penned up in deep caverns, and drive rocks against rocks, and substance containing the seeds of flame, and this catches fire from the friction of the stones, still the caves will become cool again when the winds have spent their force. Or if it is pitchy substances that cause the fire, and yellow sulphur, burning with scarce seen flames, surely when the earth shall no longer furnish food and rich sustenance for the fire, and its strength after long ages has been exhausted, and greedy nature shall feel lack of her own nourishment, then she will not endure hunger, and, being deserted, will desert her fires. There is a story of certain men in Hyperborean Pallene, who gain a covering of light feathers for their bodies, after they have 9 times plunged in Minerva's pool. I do not vouch for it, but the Scythian women also are said to sprinkle their bodies with certain magic juices, and produce the same effect. Still, if credence is to be given to things that have actually been tested, do you not see that whenever dead bodies, by lapse of time, or by the liquefying power of heat, have become thoroughly putrid, tiny animals are bred in them? Bury the carcasses of choice bulls in a ditch, after they have been offered in sacrifice, it is a well-known experiment, and from the putrid entrails everywhere will spring flower-culling bees, which, after the fashion of their progenitors, frequent the country fields, are fond of work, and toil in hope of their reward. A horse, which is a warlike animal, buried in the ground, will produce hornets. If you cut off the hollow claws of a sea crab, and bury the rest in the ground, from the buried part a scorpion will come forth, threatening with his hooked tail. And worms that weave their white cocoons on the leaves of trees, a fact well known to country folk, change into funereal butterflies. Note: the departed soul is sometimes represented on tombstones as a butterfly. Return to text. Slimy mud contains seeds that produce green frogs, without legs at first, but soon it gives them legs adapted to swimming, and that these may be fitted for taking long leaps also, the hind legs are longer than the fore. A cub that a she-bear has just brought forth is not a cub, but a scarce living lump of flesh, but the mother licks it into shape, and in this way gives it as much of a form as she has herself. Do you not see how the larvae of the honey-bearing bees, which the hexagonal waxen cell protects, are born mere memberless bodies, and later put on feet and wings? Juno's bird, which wears starry spots on its tail, and the weapon-bearing bird of Jove, and Cytherea's doves, and the whole family of birds, who would believe, who did not know the facts, that these could be born from the inside of an egg? There are some who think that when the backbone of a man has decomposed in the narrow tomb, the spinal marrow is changed into a snake. Now, all these things get their life's beginning from some other creature, but there is one bird which itself renews and reproduces its own being. The Assyrians call it the phoenix. It does not live on seeds and green things, but on the gum of frankincense and the juices of amomum. This bird, you may know, when it has completed 5 centuries of its life, builds for itself a nest in the topmost branches of a waving palm tree, using his talons and his clean beak. And when he has covered this over with cassia bark and spikes of smooth nard, broken cinnamon, and yellow myrrh, he takes his place upon it, and so ends his life amidst the odors. and from his father's body, so they say, a little phoenix springs up, which is destined to attain the same length of years. When age has given him strength, and he is able to carry burdens, he relieves the tall palm's branches of the heavy nest, piously bears his own cradle and his father's tomb through the thin air, until, having reached the city of the sun, he lays the nest down before the sacred doors of the sun's temple. But if there is anything to wonder at in such novelties as these, we might wonder that the hyena changes her nature, and that a creature which was but now a female and mated with a male is now a male herself. That little animal also, note the chameleon, return to text, which gets its nourishment from wind and air, immediately takes the color of whatever thing it rests upon. Conquered India gave to cluster-crowned Bacchus some lynxes as a present, whose watery secretions, as they say, change into stones and harden in contact with the air. So also coral hardens at the first touch of air, whereas it was a soft plant beneath the water. The day will come to an end, and Phoebus will bathe his panting horses in the deep waters of the sea, before I tell of all the things which have assumed new forms. So we see times changing, and some nations putting on new strength, and others falling into weakness. So was Troy great in wealth and men, and for 10 years was able to give so freely of her blood. But now, humbled to earth, she has naught to show but ancient ruins, no wealth but ancestral tombs. Sparta was at one time a famous city, great Mycenae flourished, and Cecrops and Amphion citadels. Sparta is now a worthless countryside, proud Mycenae has fallen, and what is the Thebes of Oedipus except a name? What is left of Pandion's Athens but a name? And now fame has it that Dardanian Rome is rising, and laying deep and strong foundations by the stream of Tiber, sprung from the Apennines. She therefore is changing her form by growth, and some day shall be the capital of the boundless world. So they tell us seers and fate-revealing oracles are declaring. And, as I myself remember, when Troy was tottering to her fall, Helenus, the son of Priam, said to Aeneas, who was weeping and doubtful of his fate, O son of Venus, if you keep well in mind my soul's prophetic visions, while you live, Troy shall not wholly perish. Fire and sword shall give way before you. You shall go forth, and with you shall you catch up and bear away your Pergama, until you shall find a foreign land, kinder to Troy and you than your own country. I see, even now, a city destined to the descendants of the Phrygians, than which none greater is, or shall be, or has been in past ages. Other princes through the long centuries shall make her powerful, but a prince sprung from Iülus blood shall make her mistress of the world. When earth shall have had her share of him, the celestial regions shall enjoy him, and heaven shall be his goal. These things I well remember that Helenus prophesied to Aeneas, as he bore with him his guardian gods, and I rejoice that my kindred walls are rising, and that the Greeks conquered to the profit of the Phrygians. End of Book 15, Part 1. End of Section 20. Section 21 of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, translated by Frank Justice Miller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Thomas Copeland. Book 15, Part 2. But not to wander too far out of my course, my steeds forgetting meanwhile to speed towards the goal, the heavens and whatever is beneath the heavens change their forms, the earth and all that is within it. We also change, who are a part of creation, since we are not bodies only, but also winged souls, and since we can enter wild beast forms and be lodged in the bodies of cattle. We should permit bodies which may possibly have sheltered the souls of our parents or brothers, or those joined to us by some other bond, or of men at least, to be uninjured and respected, and not load our stomachs as with a Thyestean banquet. What an evil habit he is forming! How surely is he impiously preparing to shed human blood, who cuts a calf's throat with the knife, and listens all unmoved to its piteous cries? Or who can slay a kid which cries just like a little child, or feed on a bird to which he himself has just given food? How much does such a deed as that fall short of actual murder? What is the end of such a course? Let the bull plough, and let him owe his death to length of days. Let the sheep arm you against the rough north wind. Let the she-goats give full udders to the milking. Have done with nets and traps, snares and deceptive arts. Catch not the bird with the limed twig. No longer hem in the deer with fear-compelling feathers. Note, hung on trees to scare the deer towards the nets. Return to text. Nor conceal the barbed hook beneath fair-seeming food. Kill creatures that work you harm, but even in the case of these, let killing suffice. Make not their flesh your food, but seek a more harmless nourishment. They say that Numa, with mind filled with these and other teachings, returned to his own land, and being urged thereto, assumed the guidance of the Latin state. He, blessed with a nymph for wife, note Egeria, return to text, blessed with the Muses' guidance, taught holy rites, and trained a fierce warlike people in the arts of peace. When he, now ripe in years, laid down his sceptre and his life, the Latin mothers, the commons, and the fathers all mourned for the departed Numa. For his wife fled from the city and hid herself away in the dense forests of the Arician vale, and by her groans and lamentations she disturbed the worship of Orestian Diana. Oh, how often the nymphs of wood and lake urged her to desist, and spoke words of consolation! How often to the weeping nymph the heroic son of Theseus said, "Have done with tears, for yours is not the only lot to be lamented. Think upon others who have borne equal losses, then will you bear your own more gently. And I would that I had no experience of my own wherewith to comfort you in your grief, but even mine can comfort you." You may have heard some mention of Hippolytus, how he met his death through the easy credence of his father and the wiles of his accursed stepmother. You will be amazed, and I shall scarce prove my statement, but nevertheless I myself am he. Pasiphae's daughter once, when she had tried in vain to tempt me to defile my father's couch, perverting truth, pretended that I had willed what she herself had willed. Was it through fear of discovery, or offence at her repulse? And, guiltless though I was, my father drove me from the city, and cursed me as I went with a deadly curse. Banished from home, I was making for Troyzen, Pythia's city, in my chariot, and now was coursing along the beach of the Corinthian bay, when the sea rose up, and a huge mound of water seemed to swell and grow to mountain size, to give forth bellowings, and to be cleft at its highest point. Then the waves burst, and a horned bull was cast forth, and raised from the sea breast high into the yielding air, he spouted out great quantities of water from his nostrils and wide mouth. The hearts of my companions quaked with fear, but my own soul was unterrified, filled with its own thoughts of exile. Then suddenly my spirited horses faced towards the sea, and with ears pricked forward, quaked and trembled with fear at the monstrous shape, then dashed with the chariot at headlong speed over the steep rocky way. I vainly strove to check them with the reins, flecked with white foam, and leaning backward, strained at the tough thongs. Still would the horse's mad strength not have surpassed my own, had not a wheel, striking its hub against a projecting stalk, been broken and wrenched off from the axle. I was thrown from my car, and, while the reins held my legs fast, you might see my living flesh dragged along, my sinews held on the sharp stake, my limbs partly drawn on, and in part caught fast and left behind, and my bones broken with a loud snapping sound. You might see my spent spirit breathed out, and there was no part of my body which you could recognize, but it was all one great wound. Now can you, dare you, nymph, compare your loss with my disaster? Further, I saw the rayless world of death, and bathed my torn body in the waves of Phlegethon. And there should I still be, had not Apollo's son by his potent remedies given me back my life. And when I had regained it by the help of strong herbs and medicinal aid, though 'twas against the will of Dis, then Cynthia threw a thick cloud around me, lest I be seen, and stir up envy of my gift of life. And that I might be safe, and able to be seen without fear of punishment, she gave me the look of age, and left me no features that could be recognized. She debated long whether to give me Crete or Delos for my home, but deciding against Crete and Delos, she placed me here, and bade me lay aside the name which could remind me of my horses, and said, "You who were Hippolytus shall now be Virbius." From that time I have dwelt within this grove, and, one of the lesser deities, I hide beneath my mistress deity, and am accepted as her follower. But Egeria's grief could not be assuaged by the woes of others, and lying prostrate at the mountain's base, she melted away in tears, until Phoebus' sister, in pity of her faithful sorrow, made her body into a cool spring, and dissolved her slender limbs into unfailing streams. This strange event struck the nymphs with wonder, and the son of the Amazon was no less amazed than was the Tyrrhene ploughman when he saw in his fields a clod, big with fate, first moving of its own accord, and with no one touching it, then taking on the form of man and losing its earthy shape, and finally opening its new-made mouth to speak things that were to be. The natives called him Tages, who first taught the Etruscan race how to read the future. And no less amazed than was Romulus, when of old he saw his spear, which he had planted on the Palatine hill, suddenly putting forth leaves, and standing not with iron point driven in the earth, but with new-grown roots. And now 'twas not a spear at all, but a tough-fibred tree, giving unexpected shade to those who gazed on it in wonder. Or then was Quippus, when in the river water he saw horns springing from his head. For he saw them, and, thinking that he was deceived by the reflection, lifting his hands again and again to his forehead, he touched what he saw. And now, no longer disbelieving his eyes, he halted on his triumphal march, and, lifting his hands and eyes to the heavens, cried, "O ye gods! Whatever is portended by this monstrous thing, if it be fortunate, let the good fortune befall my country and the people of Quirinus. But if it threaten ill, may the ill be mine." Then, making an altar of green turf, he appeased the gods with a fragrant burnt offering, made a libation of wine, and consulted the quivering entrails of the slaughtered victims as to what they might mean for him. When the Etruscan seer inspected these, he saw the signs of great enterprises there, but not yet clearly visible. But when he raised his keen eyes from the sheep's entrails to the horns of Quippus, he cried, "All hail, O king! For to thee, Quippus, and to thy horns shall this place and Latium citadels bow down. Only delay not, and make speed to enter the open gates. Such is fate's command. For received within the city, thou shalt be king, and wield the sceptre in safe and endless sway." He started back, and keeping his gaze stubbornly turned from the city's walls, he said, "Far, oh, far from me may the gods keep every such fate. Better far it is that I should spend my days exiled from home, than that the capital should see me king." He spoke, and straightway called a joint assembly of the people and the revered senate. But first he hid his horns with a wreath of peaceful laurel. Then, standing on a mound raised by the brave soldiery, and praying to the ancient gods according to the rite, he said, "There is one here who will be king unless you drive him from your city. Who he is, not by his name, but by a sign I will disclose to you. He wears horns upon his brow. The augur declares that if once he enters Rome, he will reduce you to the rank of slaves. He might have forced his way through your gates, for they stand open, but I withstood him, though no one is more closely bound to him than I. Do you, Quirites, keep him from your city, or if he deserves it, bind him with heavy fetters, or end your fear of the fated tyrant by his death." At this such a murmur arose among the people as comes from the high-girt pine groves when the boisterous wind whistles through them, or as the waves of the sea make heard from afar. But midst the confused words of the murmuring throng, one cry rose clear, "Who is the man?" They looked at each other's foreheads, and sought to find the horns that had been spoken of. Then Cephalus spoke again, and said, "Him whom you seek you have." And removing the wreath from his head, while the people sought to stay him, he showed to them his temples, marked with the 2 horns. All cast down their eyes and groaned aloud, and, who could believe it, reluctantly looked upon that deservedly illustrious head. Then, not suffering him further to stand dishonored, they replaced upon his head the festal wreath. But the Senate, since you might not come within the walls, gave you, Cephalus, as a gift of honor, as much land as you could enclose with a yoke of oxen and a plough from dawn till close of day. And the horns, in all their wondrous beauty, they engraved upon the bronze pillars of the gates, there to remain through all the ages. Reveal to me now, O Muses, ye ever helpful divinities of bards, for you know, nor has far-stretching time dimmed your memory, whence did the island bathed by the deep Tiber bring Coronis' son, note Aesculapius, return to text, and set him midst the deities of Rome? In olden time a deadly pestilence had corrupted Latium's air, and men's bodies lay wasting and pale with a ghastly disease. When, weary with caring for the dead, men saw that their human efforts were as nothing, and that the healer's arts were of no avail, they sought the aid of heaven, and coming to Delphi, situate in the earth's central spot, the sacred oracle of Phoebus, they begged that the god would vouchsafe with his health-bringing lots to succor them in their wretchedness and end the woes of their great city. Then did the shrine and the laurel tree and the quiver which the god himself bears quake together, and the tripod from the inmost shrine gave forth these words, and stirred their hearts trembling with fear: "What you seek from this place, you should have sought, O Roman, from a nearer place, and even now seek from that nearer place. Nor have you any need of Apollo to abate your troubles, but of Apollo's son. Go with kindly auspices, and call on my son." When the Senate, rich in wisdom, heard the commands of the god, they sought in what city the son of Phoebus dwelt, and sent an embassy by ship to seek out the coast of Epidaurus. When the embassy had beached their curved keel upon that shore, they betook them to the council of the Grecian elders, and prayed that they would give the god, who with his present deity might end the deadly woes of the Ausonian race. For thus the oracle distinctly bade. The elders disagreed, and sat with varying minds. Some thought that aid should not be refused, but the many advised to keep their god, and not let go the source of their own wealth, nor deliver up their deity. And while they sat in doubt, the dusk of evening dispelled the lingering day, and the darkness spread its shadows over the world. Then did the health-giving god seem in your dreams to stand before your couch, O Roman, even as he is wont to appear in his own temple, holding his rustic staff in his left hand, and with his right stroking his flowing beard, and with calm utterance to speak these words: "Fear not, I shall come and leave my shrine. Only look upon this serpent which twines about my staff, and fix it on your sight, that you may know it. I shall change myself to this, but shall be larger, and shall seem as great as celestial bodies should be when they change." Straightway the god vanished as he spoke, and with the voice and the god sleep vanished too, and the kindly day dawned as sleep fled. The next morning had put the gleaming stars to flight, when the chiefs, still uncertain what to do, assembled at the sumptuous temple of the sought-for god, and begged him by heavenly tokens to reveal where he himself wished to abide. Scarce had they ceased to speak, when the golden god, in the form of a serpent with high crest, uttered hissing warnings of his presence, and at his coming the statue, altars, doors, the marble pavement, and gilded roof all rocked. Then, raised breast high in the temple's midst, he stood and gazed about with eyes flashing fire. The terrified multitude quaked with fear, but the priest, with his sacred locks bound with a white fillet, recognized the divinity, and cried, "The god! Behold the god! Think holy thoughts, and stand in reverent silence, all ye who are in this presence. And, O thou most beautiful, be this vision of thee expedient for us, and bless thou this people who worship at thy shrine." All in the divine presence worshipped the god as they were bid, repeating the priest's words after him, and the Romans too performed their pious devotions with heart and lips. The god nodded graciously to them, and, moving his crest, assured them of his favor, and with darting tongue gave forth repeated hisses. Then he glided down the polished steps, and with backward gaze looked fixedly upon the ancient altars which he was about to leave, and saluted his well-known home and the shrine where he had dwelt so long. Thence the huge serpent wound his way along the ground covered with scattered flowers, bending and coiling as he went, and proceeded through the city's midst to the harbor, guarded by a curving embankment. Here he halted, and seeming with kindly expression to dismiss his throng of pious followers, he took his place within the Ausonian ship. It felt the burden of the deity, and the keel was forced deep down by the god's weight. The Romans were filled with joy, and after sacrificing a bull upon the beach, they wreathed their ship with flowers and cast loose from the shore. A gentle breeze bore the vessel on, while the god, rising on high and reclining heavily with his neck resting upon the ship's curving stern, gazed down upon the azure waters. With fair winds he sailed through the Ionian Sea, and on the 6th morning he reached Italy, sailed past the shores of Lacinium, famed for Juno's temple, past Scyllacium, left Iapygia behind, and, avoiding the Amphrysian rocks upon the left and the Cocinthian crags upon the right, skirted Romethium and Caulon and Naurisha, then passed the Sicilian Sea and Pelorus narrow strait, sailed by the home of King Hippotades, past the copper mines of Temesa, and headed for Leucosia and mild Paestum's rose gardens. Thence he skirted Capreae, Minerva's promontory, and the hills of Surrentum, rich in vines. Then sailed to Herculaneum and Stabiae and Parthenope, note, i.e. Naples, return to text, for soft pleasure founded, and from there to the temple of the Cumaean Sibyl. Next the hot pools were reached, note, of Baiae, return to text, and Luternum, thick grown with mastic-bearing trees, and Vulturnus, sweeping along vast quantities of sand beneath its whirling waters, Sinuessa, with its thronging flocks of snow-white doves, unwholesome Minturnae, and the place, note, Caeta, return to text, named for her whose foster son, note, Aeneas, return to text, entombed her there, the home of Antiphates, marsh-encompassed Trachas, Circe's land also, and Antium with its hard-packed shore. When to this place the sailors turned their ship, with sails full spread, for the sea was rough, the god unfolded his coils, and gliding on with many a sinuous curve and mighty fold, entered his father's temple, set on the tawny strand. When the sea had calmed again, the Epidaurian god left his paternal altars, and having enjoyed the hospitality of his kindred deity, furrowed the sandy shore as he dragged his rasping scales along, and climbing up the rudder, reposed his head on the vessel's lofty stern, until he came to Castrum, the sacred seats of Lavinium and the Tiber's mouth. Hither the whole mass of the populace came thronging to meet him from every side, matrons and fathers, and the maids who tend thy fires, O Trojan Vesta, and they saluted the god with joyful cries. And where the swift ship floated up the stream, incense burned with a crackling sound on altars built in regular order on both the banks. The air was heavy with sweet perfumes, and the smitten victim warmed the sacrificial knife with his blood. And now the ship had entered Rome, the capital of the world. The serpent raised himself aloft, and resting his head upon the mast's top, moved it from side to side, viewing the places fit for his abode. The river, flowing around, separates at this point into two parts, forming the place called the island. On each side it stretches out two equal arms, with the land between. On this spot the serpent son of Phoebus disembarked from the Latian ship, and resuming his heavenly form, put an end to the people's woes, and came to them as health-bringer to their city. Now he came to our shrines as a god from a foreign land, but Caesar is God in his own city. Him, illustrious in war and peace, not so much his wars triumphantly achieved, his civic deeds accomplished, and his glory quickly won, changed to a new heavenly body, a flaming star, but still more his offspring deified him. For there is no work among all Caesar's achievements greater than this, that he became the father of this our emperor. Is it indeed a greater thing to have subdued the sea-girt Britons, to have led his victorious fleet up the seven-mouthed stream of the papyrus-bearing Nile, to have added the rebellious Numidians, Libyan Juba, and Pontus, swelling with threats of the mighty name of Mithridates, to the sway of the people of Quirinus, to have celebrated some triumphs, and to have earned many more, than to have begotten so great a man? With him as ruler of the world, you have indeed, O heavenly ones, showered rich blessings upon the human race. So then, that his son might not be born of mortal seed, Caesar must needs be made of God. When the golden mother of Aeneas saw this, and saw also that dire destruction was being plotted against her high priest, and that an armed conspiracy was forming, she paled with fear, and cried to all the gods as she met them in turn, Behold, what a crushing weight of plots is prepared against me, and with what snares that life is sought which alone remains to me from Dardania and Iülus. Shall I alone for ever be harassed by well-founded cares, since now the Caledonian spear of Diomede wounds me, and now the falling walls of ill-defended Troy o'erwhelm me, since I see my son driven by long wanderings, tossed on the sea, entering the abodes of the silent shades, and waging war with Turnus, or, if we speak plain truth, with Juno rather? But why do I now recall the ancient sufferings of my race? This present fear of mine does not permit me to remember former woes. Look, do you not see that impious daggers are being whetted? Ward them off, I pray. Prevent this crime, and let not Vesta's fires be extinguished by her high priest's blood. The anxious goddess cried these complaints throughout the sky, but all in vain. The gods were moved indeed, and although they were not able to break the iron decrees of the ancient sisters, still they gave no uncertain portents of the woe that was at hand. They say that the clashing of arms amid the dark storm clouds, and fear-inspiring trumpets and horns heard in the sky, forewarned men of the crime. Also the darkened face of the sun shone with lurid light upon the troubled lands. Often firebrands were seen to flash amidst the stars. Often drops of blood fell down from the clouds. The morning star was of dusky hue, and his face was blotched with dark red spots, and Luna's chariot was stained with blood. In 1,000 places the Stygian owl gave forth his mournful warnings. In 1,000 places ivory statues dripped tears, and in the sacred groves wailing notes and threatening words were heard. No victim sufficed for expiation. The liver warned that portentous struggles were at hand, and its lobe was found cleft amidst the entrails. In the marketplace and around men's houses and the temples of the gods, they say, dogs howled by night, The shades of the silent dead walked abroad, and the city was shaken with earthquakes. Yet, even so, the warnings of the gods were unable to check the plots of men and the advancing fates. Naked swords were brought into the sacred curia, for no place in the whole city would do for this crime, this dreadful deed of blood, save only that. Then indeed did Cytherea smite on her breast with both her hands, and strive to hide her Caesar in a cloud, in which of old Paris had been rescued from the murderous Atrides, and in which Aeneas had escaped the sword of Diomed. Then thus the father spoke: Dost thou, by thy sole power, my daughter, think to move the changeless fates? Thou thyself mayst enter the abode of the three sisters. Thou shalt there behold the records of all that happens on tablets of brass and solid iron, a massive structure, tablets which fear neither the crashings of the sky nor the lightning's fearful power, nor any destructive shocks which may befall, being eternal and secure. There shalt thou find engraved on everlasting adamant thy descendants' fates. I have myself read these, and marked them well in mind. And these will I relate, that thou mayst be no longer ignorant of that which is to come. This son of thine, goddess of Cythera, for whom thou grievest, hast fulfilled his allotted time, and his years are finished which he owed to earth, that as a god he may enter heaven, and have his place in temples on the earth, thou shalt accomplish, thou and his son. He, as successor to the name, shall bear alone the burden placed on him, and as the most valiant avenger of his father's murder, he shall have us as ally for his wars. Under his command the conquered walls of leaguered Mutina shall sue for peace. Pharsalia shall feel his power. Emathian Philippi shall reek again with blood. Note: Emathian, i.e. Macedonian. Emathia was a district of Macedonia. Reek again with blood. Though Philippi is in Macedonia and Pharsalus in Thessaly, Ovid, with poetic daring, practically identifies the two great battlefields. Return to text. And he of the great name, note, Sextus Pompeius, youngest son of Pompey the Great, he seems also to have assumed the name Magnus. Return to text. Shall be overcome on Sicilian waters. A Roman general's Egyptian mistress, who did not well to rely upon the union, shall fall before him, and in vain shall she have threatened that our capital shall bow to her Canopus. But why should I recall barbaric lands to you, and nations lying on either ocean shore? Nay, whatsoever habitable land the earth contains shall be his, and the sea also shall come beneath his sway. When peace has been bestowed upon all lands, he shall turn his mind to the rights of citizens, and as a most righteous jurist promote the laws. By his own good example shall he direct the ways of men, and looking forward to future time and coming generations, he shall bid the son, note Tiberius, son of Livia and Tiberius Claudius Nero, return to text, born of his chaste wife, to bear at once his name and the burden of his cares, and not till after he as an old man shall have equalled Nestor's years shall he attain the heavenly seats and his related stars. Meanwhile do thou catch up this soul, note, i.e. of Julius Caesar, return to text, from the slain body, and make him a star, in order that ever it may be the divine Julius who looks forth upon our capital and forum from his lofty temple. Scarce had he spoken, when fostering Venus took her place within the Senate house, unseen of all, caught up the passing soul of her Caesar from his body, and, not suffering it to vanish into air, she bore it towards the stars of heaven. And as she bore it, she felt it glow and burn, and released it from her bosom. Higher than the moon it mounted up, and leaving behind it a long fiery train, gleamed as a star. And now, beholding the good deeds of his son, he confesses that they are greater than his own, and rejoices to be surpassed by him. And though the son forbids that his own deeds be set above his father's, still fame, unfettered and obedient to no one's will, exalts him spite of his desire, and in this one thing opposes his commands. So does the great Atreus yield in honour to his son Agamemnon. So does Theseus rival Aegeus, and Achilles Peleus. Finally, to quote an instance worthy of themselves, is Saturn less than Jove. Jupiter controls the heights of heaven and the kingdoms of the triformed universe, but the earth is under Augustus' sway. Each is both sire and ruler. O gods, I pray you, comrades of Aeneas, before whom both fire and sword gave way, and ye native gods of Italy, and thou Quirinus, father of our city, and Gradivus, invincible Quirinus' sire, and Vesta, who hast ever held a sacred place midst Caesar's household gods, and thou, Apollo, linked in worship with our Caesar's Vesta, and Jupiter, whose temple sits high on Tarpeia's rock, and all ye other gods to whom it is fitting for the bard to make appeal, far distant be that day, and later than our own time, when Augustus, abandoning the world he rules, shall mount to heaven, and there, removed from our presence, listen to our prayers. And now my work is done, which neither the wrath of Jove, nor fire, nor sword, nor the gnawing tooth of time shall ever be able to undo. When it will, let that day come, which has no power save over this mortal frame, and end the span of my uncertain years. Still in my better part I shall be born immortal far beyond the lofty stars, and I shall have an undying name. Wherever Rome's power extends over the conquered world, I shall have mention on men's lips, and if the prophecies of bards have any truth, through all the ages shall I live in fame. End of Book 5. End of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, translated by Frank Justice Miller.